Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wellness Pharmacist. I'm Dr. Kat, your host, and I'm excited to delve into this topic today. It's near and dear to my heart. If you're new, this is a space where we talk about all things health and wellness, especially for those of us managing chronic illnesses. Let's be honest, as far as today's topic, it's nutrition. And this is a hot topic for lots of us. It's been a huge part of my life living with chronic illness. And I get how overwhelming it can be, especially when we're dealing with things like chronic fatigue, joint pain, inflammation. It can also get difficult when we have well-meaning people tell us, oh, you just need to eat better. Because we haven't thought about that ourselves, right? And if you're anything like me, I turn to food. I turn to food and comforts. For anything happy, sad, in between, I turn to food. So this is kind of a touchy subject for some of us. And today, though, what I'd like to do is, let's be realistic about it, give you some diet tips that can help manage autoimmune disease and chronic illness and inflammation without the overwhelm. We'll be using some research from Harvard's Nutrition Guide as our foundation, so this is all science-backed stuff. But as a disclaimer, as always, please consult your own healthcare team because they know you best. Okay, so let's start with why nutrition is such a big deal when we're living with chronic illnesses, especially autoimmune diseases. Basically, as I've gone over in a previous episode, autoimmune diseases cause our immune systems to attack our own healthy cells, which then leads to inflammation. And when that inflammation then becomes chronic, it wreaks havoc on our bodies. What a lot of people don't realize is that the food we eat has a huge impact on this. There are certain foods that can help calm inflammation and the inflammation markers and pathways, while there are others on the flip side that can make it worse. I've experienced both ends of the spectrum. This is not an easy topic, and it's not an easy necessarily solution, so I'm with you on this one. I'm sure many of you have this issue too. Harvard's Nutrition Guide, they have this nutrition plate, has this awesome concept of a healthy eating plate, which I've studied, and this helps reduce inflammation. Plus, there's an autoimmune protocol diet that if you've had chronic illness long enough, especially autoimmune disease, obviously you've heard about. It's supposed to help reduce inflammation in the body, find the foods that your body reacts to and those that it doesn't react to, and helps keep inflammation at a low minimum, hopefully. And it's not just a fad. These things have been researched recently and shown promise. What it is about focusing on whole nutrient-rich foods to naturally reduce inflammation in our bodies. I know this can be a complicated topic, but I'm here to break it down into steps that are actually doable. Okay, what should we be eating to fight inflammation? That's the basic question. Harvard gives us some clear guidelines, and I'm going over the basics with you right now. Number 1, healthy fats. What is that? First up, healthy fats are our friends. Omega-3s, that's a healthy fat, which you can find in foods like salmon, so fatty fishes, chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts. They're fantastic for reducing inflammation. On the flip side, we want to stay away from trans fats. And I know in the United States, they've pretty much taken away a lot of the trans fats, but it's still available. Those are in things like fried foods, processed snacks, And these things really trigger inflammation. This one's hard because I lived in the South for so long and fried foods are a huge thing. Who doesn't like processed foods? I mean, I know I do, again, living in the South, but it is full of like trans and saturated fats, and it is something that we need to be on the lookout for. But the unprocessed or the processed snacks and the fried foods, they can really trigger inflammation. And it's best to keep them to a minimum. I always say in moderation because it's impossible to not eat things. I shouldn't say impossible because in the word impossible, it's impossible. But it's better if we keep them in moderation. Number 2, we look at whole grains. So we want to swap out our refined grains like white bread and pasta for whole grains. Whole grains like brown rice, quinoa, oats. These grains have more fiber in them, which is linked to lower inflammation levels. This comes from the National Institutes of Health, Columbia University, the Arthritis Foundation, and others. It reduces, apparently, the release of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukins. These promote inflammation. They promote cardiovascular disease. And a bonus, though, of swapping out refined grains for whole grains is that they keep you fuller for longer, which is always a great idea. Now, if you're anything like me, I still have to have my pasta, and we still can. So alternative pasta ideas are chickpea pasta, brown rice pasta, and even quinoa pasta. And while they do taste slightly different, it's still pasta, and we can still have our spaghetti and things like that. So we don't have to miss out. Are they more expensive? Yes. So I like to keep that down to maybe once a week just to save costs, but we still can have them. And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. The idea being that you can still have your favorites. It's just packed full of good fiber and protein, which then helps us feel better. Plus, increasing our fiber by like 5 grams per day can give us health benefits, get us trimmer, improve our heart health, and just our overall health. So why not feel better, look better, and not have to worry about those pesky tests? Am I right? Number 3, fruits and veggies. Everybody knows to eat fruits and vegetables, but what we really need to harp on is to focus on a rainbow of color on our plate. We aim for a colorful plate. I know you've probably heard this like a million times before, but it really does make a difference. Leafy greens like spinach and kale, I've been told by my own nutritionist, kale chips, spinach chips, they are a thing. Look into those with low salt on them. Berries, we're not just talking blueberries and strawberries, which are still great for us. We're talking also blackberries, raspberries. These things are super good for you, and they do come in the frozen food section, and they're a lot cheaper too, and you can get them all year round. Also, with the veggies, we would like to make sure we include cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, because these are packed with antioxidants, and antioxidants are great not only for inflammation but also for their anti-cancer properties. Number 4, we look at lean proteins. When it comes to protein, a leaner source is better. Lean means chicken, turkey, tofu, or beans, and most people don't even think about beans. Harvard recommends a more plant-based protein, which are particularly good for keeping inflammation in check. But I know the thought, people go, beans? Are we kidding me? Yes, so beans are great. They have great fiber, great protein. They're relatively inexpensive. They're cheap. The issue with beans is, I know everybody's heard beans, musical fruit, and they'd be right. If we get too much fiber at once, we get bloating, diarrhea, we get gas, and nobody likes that. And there are those that, with autoimmune disease, for whatever reason, there are certain people that react to beans, and we just feel awful. Nightshade vegetables included, so like eggplants, white potatoes, we just don't feel well. And in the autoimmune protocol diet, we get rid of those out of our diet for a short period of time. And for some of us, it's a long period of time. I've done it. I've actually done that protocol diet. And then you don't have it for a while, see how you feel. Then you start gradually adding one thing back at a time to see how your body reacts to it or doesn't react to it. I did get rid of beans that way. I did get rid of tofu that way. And then when I added them back, I noticed no change. So for me, I can eat beans and I love them. I can open a can of beans. Black beans are my favorite. I can open a can of black beans for breakfast. Yes, breakfast. And I can eat it out of the can. But what we want to do is we want to gradually increase our fiber amounts, because if we don't and we just eat a lot of fiber, it can make us feel miserable, and then we won't touch the stuff again. In the US, adults generally get about 14 grams of fiber a day. What is the recommended? It varies. And it also varies per country of origin, but generally between 25 grams to 35 grams, up to 40 grams, depending on the country. For women and men, women being on the lower ends and men being on the higher end, like 35 grams. So I say always shoot for 35 grams of fiber a day. But again, you start low. So if you're used to and you calculate that you get around 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, then the key here is to just increase for a week or two, just an extra 5 grams a day. So if we're at 10, then we go to 15. We get adjusted to that, and then we increase by another 5 until we get to that kind of magical mark, that maybe 30 grams to 35 grams of fiber a day. This way, we're gradually getting into it and we adjust better. Also, I want to make a note that some people react to tofu too, and if we get too much tofu all at once, it's the same effect as the beans. So if we're adding tofu and beans, we just need to be careful because they are packed with fiber, and tofu can cause the same kind of effects as beans. So we want to be gradual about it. Number 5, we have spices, and I think a lot of people forget about spices. We're talking about turmeric, ginger, garlic. These sorts of things have anti-inflammatory properties. There are recipes online for like a turmeric milk combination, and they talk about like coconut milk. Coconut milk, as I'll go into, is higher in fat, so we don't want to use it all that often. But I've actually had a combination of turmeric and some coconut milk. It tastes really good. And it is anti-inflammatory if you do it in the right proportions and the right way. Ginger is what I generally focus on. Ginger and garlic, those are great, and I love garlic. And the only caveat here is if we're on blood thinners, any kind of blood thinners, again, always talk to your healthcare provider and specialists. Garlic can interact with some of the blood thinners out there, so just keep that in the back of your mind. But if we add cinnamon or things like that, cinnamon's been shown to help with blood sugar levels. These things are wonderful, and they can spice up, yes, pun intended, they can spice up our food and then make life more enjoyable. So let's not forget the spices. All right. Now let's talk about what you want to keep in moderation, what you want to sometimes avoid. I know it's not fun to think about, but this is where it gets real. Some foods do fuel inflammation, and cutting them out, or at least reducing them in our diets, can make a huge difference in how we feel each day. Number 1, we have processed foods, and I always think, what is that? These are considered like the culprits. So in my mind, I see like those cartoons of kids, the bandit, the cartoon bandit. These are the ones that we want to keep in moderation or completely exclude from our diet. That's anything that's packaged. That's anything with a super long shelf life. It's probably processed. We're talking chips, frozen meals, cookies. They usually contain unhealthy fats, and when we're talking unhealthy fats, we're talking loads of saturated fat, trans fats, And again, I can go further into that. Think cooled bacon grease, loads of cheese, loads of whole milk, coconut milk. And then we also have lots of sugars in these processed foods. All of this can make inflammation worse. Now, do we completely exclude bacon from our diets? No. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be careful how much we do consume. You will always hear an outlier of some person that lived to be 100 or 110. I've heard it myself, where they've eaten a pack of bacon every morning for breakfast and they had black coffee and they're great. Their genetics are probably phenomenal. They're an outlier. The vast majority of people, that's not the way it's going to work. And especially if we already have chronic disease and chronic illness, it's not working for us. So we need to keep those either to a bare minimum or we exclude them, especially if we've had a heart attack, stroke, things like that. But I do want to say, when we're talking about chips, I think chips and cookies are my Achilles heel on that one. But I mentioned earlier about like kale chips. I mean, there are certain things that you can look at and be very, very careful with. Again, just moderation. Moderation is key. Another thing we want to watch in our diets are what we eat every day. I loathe the term diet, although I keep saying it. It's just built into my brain. It's by habit, but it's how we eat. It's our way of life. A diet, people think, oh, I'm taking something away, and that's a negative connotation. So this is just what we eat on a regular basis. Let's watch out for refined carbs and sugars. I'm not saying, again, that you can never have a sweet, but we want to keep at a bare minimum sugary drinks, candy, and even white bread. White bread has a lot of blood sugar, sugars in it, simple carbs that can spike our blood sugars. This again causes inflammation, so we try to stick with whole grains and natural sugars from fruit when we can. Number 3, red and processed meats. This can be difficult. I know we've talked about the bacon, but sausage is also included in this. They're delicious, but they are extremely inflammatory if you eat them regularly. So again, in moderation, limiting them, limiting processed meats, limiting processed foods is key. Let's try and go for more plant-based or lean protein options when possible. And, there are things like turkey or chicken sausage. It's still sausage, but it's better, it's healthier. That's an alternative. Another thing for the meat, it's extremely expensive, and I don't eat it very often, but maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months or something. Bison burgers are extremely lean, they're extremely healthy, and they're yummy. And sometimes you can find that in a restaurant too. Okay, so we talked about what to eat and what to keep in moderation, what to really watch. But how do we actually make these changes without feeling overwhelmed or, let's be honest, blue about it, depressed about it? Because I've been there, done that. It's a lot, but I've got a few tips, simple tips that can help. Number 1, I've said before, start small. Like with the fiber, we want to start small. Don't feel like you have to overhaul your diet all in one night or 1 week. Just pick one thing to change, one thing. Maybe start with breakfast, or maybe start with the fiber. Just looking at the fiber, just one thing. Switch out, if you're going to do breakfast, switch out sugary cereal for some oats, or you can do a smoothie with grains. I tried the smoothie with grains. I don't like it. It doesn't keep me very full for very long, but the oats do. And we're not talking the prepackaged sugary oats like in the packets. I'm talking about buying in bulk the oats. I always get Bob's Red Mill. I have to be gluten-free for my own situation. I get that particular oats, but Quaker Oats makes a large container full, cylinder container full of just basic oats without any sugar added to them, plain oats. I have that, and then I'll put in the frozen, I was talking about earlier, the frozen berries, mixed berries. The one I have now comes with cherries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and some strawberries. and I just put some in my oatmeal, frozen. After I've made the oatmeal, the berries then, I don't want to say melt, but they thaw out, and then it releases the yummy juices into the oatmeal. I put some sunflower seeds on top of that, so I get my berries, antioxidants, I get my fats from the sunflower seeds, and then I have my whole grains in the oats, and the oats have protein in it. The sunflower seeds have some protein in it, and so I'm getting protein, I'm getting healthy carbs, I'm getting the antioxidants from the berries, and I don't need any sweetener because that's enough for me. So it's yummy, and I stick to it, and it's full. The one thing I will point out is a lot of people think that we only need like a quarter cup of oats. That's just not true. I eat half a cup to a cup of oats every day, and when I do with all of that, I feel fuller for much longer, and I can go 4 or 5 hours in between meals and be just fine without even thinking about food. And that's a beautiful thing. And I know I'm fueling my body, and so mentally, physically, I'm much healthier. So again, let's start small. When we do that, it's easier. We get used to that, then we move on to lunch. And then once we get used to lunch, then we move on to dinner, and so on. Number 2, let's look at meal prep. Some people swear by this. It's a game changer for some. You prep maybe on the weekend, or pick a day of the week that you're cooking all day or all afternoon or something like that, and you prepare your food for the rest of the week. When you have healthy meals already made and ready to go, you're way less likely to grab something that's processed out of convenience or impulse buy. And I've tried this before. I have chronic fatigue, so it doesn't work for me, but it does work for a lot of other people that I've talked to and consulted. So I, consider it. It may work for you. Meal prep. Number 3, keep your plate colorful. I mentioned this before, like a rainbow color. When in doubt, add more color to your plate. The more variety that you have in the fruits and vegetables that you eat, the better off you are, because you're getting more vitamins and nutrients. And not only is it good for your health, but it keeps meals more interesting and keeps you happier. And number 4, I think this is the biggest one, is listen to your body. Pay attention to how you react to the different foods that you're eating. If you want to try the Autoimmune Protocol diet, just Google it, look it up. But always speak to your healthcare provider and professionals first before you do anything like that. Everybody's body is different, so what works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So try keeping a food journal to track what helps and what doesn't, maybe. That could always help. And again, if we eat something and it doesn't agree with us, jot that down. And we can, number 1, we can try it again and see if we get the same response, or 2, we just avoid it. The other thing I want to note is that, especially for me, when I eat something, and I've heard this too from specialists say that generally what we eat today affects us tomorrow. And that's true for me. When I eat something that doesn't agree with me, it normally takes about 8 to 12 hours to 24 hours for me to notice a difference. So if I'm fine today and I eat something that I know is inflammatory, or maybe I don't know when it's in something that I go and eat at somebody's house or something, the next day I feel horrible. And I know, I've eaten something. More than likely it's gluten for me. For you, it may be eggplant or white potatoes or something like that, or beans or tofu. So a journal can really help with that, to keep track of how we're feeling. And then we go, oh, wait a minute, I had this and this and this last night or yesterday morning, and I'm feeling terrible today. And then it gives our healthcare team, our nutritionist too, and I encourage everybody to speak to a nutritionist if possible, and they can help pinpoint what may be the culprit. Before we wrap up, let's talk about supplements briefly. If you're not getting enough nutrients from food alone, there are a few supplements that might help with inflammation. We have omega-3s, fish oil, vitamin D, and probiotics. These are popular for people with autoimmune diseases. The one caveat to that, the one thing I want you to really think about, is the fact that these supplements are not, in the US, government regulated. They haven't been tried and tested necessarily for, so for instance, if it says it's got vitamin D in it, or is for probiotics are the main ones. If you have a probiotic, it'll have certain strains in there. We cannot guarantee in this country that those are the strains that are in there. In order to get around this, I often tell people, go to your pharmacist, which again, I've said in a previous episode, your community pharmacist is your lifeline. They're very knowledgeable in more than just counting pills, in more than just giving immunizations, in more than just calling insurance companies. They're extremely untapped healthcare professional that can be a major lifeline for you. And I have trusted brands that I go to when I'm talking about supplements, vitamins, minerals, things like that. So always include a community pharmacist, a good pharmacist, clinical pharmacist in your decision-making processes, because they can steer you away from certain supplements or probiotics that may not be beneficial to you, and they can help you find a brand that is more trusted. So again, if you have one that's your best friend, that's even better. A pharmacist. They're untapped. Please use them. They would love to help you with that. That said, always check with your healthcare provider before adding any new supplements to your routine. And there you have it. I hope today's episode gave you some helpful insights into nutrition and how it plays a role in managing chronic illness and inflammation. These small changes can really add up over time and make a huge difference in how we feel every day. If you've got any questions or you want to share your own experience, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Please tell me. You can find me on social media, mainly Facebook. I do have a website. It's innovationsmedicationmgmt.com. And then my email, if you want to email me, it's innovationsmedicationmgmt@gmail.com. So let me know. Drop me a line. Remember, this is a journey and every step counts. I don't care how small it is. You're not alone either in this. We're here to help. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.